This is For Keeps, a podcast about collections and connections. I'm David Peterkowski. This is a collector's story that focuses on the captivating creative output of a true character, an affable American artist who spent much of his life in two other countries, not only to further his art, but also to make a name for himself in a time-honored, dangerous, and often controversial pastime that few Americans have ever attempted. He was a man who gracefully sidestepped stereotypes. That is, when he wasn't confronting them head-on. Some people even referred to him as John Quixote. The man in question is the late John Fulton, whom the New York Times once described as someone who was tilting at cultural windmills throughout much of his life. Born Fulton John Short in Philadelphia in 1932, he was a gifted artist, but a childhood viewing of the 1941 film Blood and Sand introduced the American city kid to the exotic world of bullfighting, and John's dreams of donning the suit of lights as a matador were born. As a young adult, he studied at an art school in the Mexican city of San Miguel de Allende, and that's where he fought his first bull. Before long, John relocated to Spain, where for nearly 40 years the lifelong bachelor toiled as a bullfighter. Although he wasn't a star, he certainly got attention, sometimes referred to as El Yankee, and becoming a bit of a folk hero in his adopted hometown of Seville. John's hard work in the bullring paid off in 1963, when he became the first American to be elevated and confirmed as a matador. Still, all that matadoring didn't really pay the bills, so John kept at his other career, making a name for himself as a sought-after artist. The bulls he fought served as inspiration for many of his paintings, and on many occasions, the bulls wound up contributing even more than inspiration. John frequently created what he called blood paintings, coloring his works of art with the red blood of the bulls he killed in the ring. To some, that process and the violence of bullfighting in general may seem morbid, but the blood paintings proved popular, his evocative brushstrokes conveying the brute strength of the bulls. John's creations depicting bulls, matadors, and the pageantry of the sport also earned him assignments creating cartels, or posters that advertised upcoming bullfights. Many of John's works, from original paintings and illustrations to lithographs, cartels, and more, have ended up in the hands of Britt Zaist. Britt is an artist herself, like John, originally an American, but for the past 30 or so years, she's lived in San Miguel de Allende with her husband, fellow artist Henry Vermillion. They befriended John a few years before his sudden death from a heart attack in 1998, and they sold many of his works through a gallery they ran, until it closed recently. Today, Britt helps to keep John's unique life story and artistic legacy alive through her collection of about 80 of John's pieces. Some of them are still available for purchase online, while many others decorate Britt and Henry's Mexico home. Along with the collection of John's art, Britt has more than a few memories about her unique friend, from his incredible generosity despite never having all that much himself, to tales of John befriending not one but two famous writers, and even serving as a double for the star of one of the biggest epic historical dramas in Hollywood history. More on that later. Now in her mid-70s, Britt and her husband opened their gallery in San Miguel in 1992, and became aware of John Fulton just a couple years later. It was at the tail end of John's career, and he had come back to the city to officially retire from bullfighting, a pastime that Britt had no interest in when she first came to Mexico.
When I came to San Miguel, and it's a large bullfighting center, especially then, I did not approve of bullfighting. I thought, oh, what type of people would do this? And then, of course, I love it now, and it's really an art, and it's wonderful. So I didn't know about John at that time. when he came here, I started doing bullfight drawings myself, and I found they were very saleable, and I did them well. So I was delighted when we met John. He was taking, it's called a despedida, and that's a retirement ceremony for matadors. John started out in the Instituto, but he went full circle because the end of his career, he wanted to take the retirement ceremony, which is the despedida. He did that in San Miguel, and when he was there, he had brought really a terrific amount of work. But again, it's even then, this is almost 30 years ago. It's very expensive to bring the work. It's even more expensive to take it back. So the Instituto didn't handle paintings, but because Henry and I loved bullfighting, we loved the bullfight to see John take his final fight, and we met him, and he asked if he could leave his work with us, and that's where it all started. So really, it started in 1994, and we have been representing his work all that time.
As his local representatives in San Miguel, Britt and Henry kept his work in their gallery, but would later bring some of it back to John in Seville.
Every year, we could go to Spain, and every time we'd bring a little more artwork to return back to him. In San Miguel, it was very slow. So every May, everybody closed. That isn't the case now because we have so many tourists. But you would close for a whole month and just do whatever you wanted. And so we were lucky that that's how we met John, his friends, and they opened up. They're wonderful because this is Andalusia. In Andalusia, the people are so friendly and welcoming. It's very much like Mexico. It even looks like where we are. Sevilla is very much like San Miguel. When you go outside, and cactus even you'll see. So it was very nice. So that's when it started.
So would you say John was the one who turned you into a bullfighting fan?
No, I must say, when we first came to San Miguel, and it was in 1991, I saw the first bullfight. And I remember my husband was saying, well, let's go. And I said, I don't think we should. And anyway, I saw it, and it was marvelous. Everything was great. The bull was on, they call it on rails, like he's on a railroad track. Everything went beautifully. And I found myself going down to the first barrera, hanging over and starting to draw. It's great. So at that point, I fell in love with it. It was also monetarily good for me because with the type of artwork I do, it sold very, very well. It still does. Meeting John later was a perk. I was doing a lot of drawings of bullfighting, and then I didn't know much about John at all. Frankly, he was more of a novelty bullfighter. In other words, he was unique because he was a foreigner, but he wasn't, a famous one. So meeting him and how nice he was, that's when we started obviously collecting and representing his work.
Britt says that John always remained upbeat and charming, despite the challenges he faced over the course of his years in the bullring and the financial pinch that came with it. Did John talk to you much about the ups and downs of his bullfighting career?
No, he was a very, very positive person. For instance, he really, really wanted to he loved Mexico. Okay, he came here first, and he really loved Mexico. Mexico is different from Spain insofar that Mexicans are very, very forgiving if you're horrible with the language. They're very welcoming, and they welcome John. It was harder when he went to Spain. It was much harder because he had to, fight lesser bulls. He didn't have the money to get into the circles. Bullfighting is very much like boxing. Insofar, it helps if you have money and backers who will help you. So he had to do it the hard way. That's when he started doing these blood paintings. Again, it was unique. He needed the money. He would be at everyone said, oh, look and see the gringo. This is in Spain now, who will paint with the bull's blood. And that earned him a good deal of money so he could pursue his career. Because many people think that matadors are paid just when they start. They're not. You have to buy your own bull. You have to buy your suit of lights. You have to buy the people who will help you. And it was funny when John, and we did meet some people, was studying at the Instituto. He didn't have any extra money to buy a bull to practice with. And so the students there in his class all added money, came up with enough money. I think in those days it was not very much to get a bull, and he could fight it. So, and the one thing they said, do not get killed, John. we're Americans. We're trying to help you, not get you killed. But he was really terrific and a very, very nice person and very optimistic. He tried to help people, and I never really heard him talk down on anything.
And why would he? John's life in Spain, both in and out of the bullring, was an interesting one, full of unique accomplishments and accompaniment.
Ernest Hemingway liked him. He gave him I think $100 traveler's check. James Michener has written up. Again, John needed the money. So Michener, when he was researching books, it's called Iberia, for this book, had John write the whole chapter on bullfighting to explain it from a person that loves it, that knows it's an art, and to try to convey that to other people who may be borderline, they don't know if they should like it. So he was all over. He was great. There are many things that he did. You call him a Renaissance man. He did everything from painting and sculpture and jewelry design, photographer. He was Peter O'Toole's. I love this. That was a story he told. He was asked to be, because he was a fencer. He was a very good fencer. So he was the double for Peter O'Toole in Lawrence of Arabia. And he told this story about how the two of them really got sloshed, he and Peter O'Toole. And Peter was staying in this very wealthy hacienda affair, or finca, I guess it would be, in Spain, and how the two of them sloshed, went ahead and took this big crucifix, usually over the beds, and I think they turned it upside down. So I don't know what the ladies said, but they had a wonderful time. So he was really very, very nice. You would have liked him. He was really nice. He could speak on anything, and he was just a really nice man.
I do want to talk about the artwork that you've held on to. Off the top of your head, can you talk about any particular favorites that come to mind?
Okay, the ones that I really, really love and probably will never sell. These are templates. As I said, John needed to find a way to earn money. So what he would do is he would take a piece of, it was sort of vellum-like paper, and he would use a very soft-leaded pencil so that he would do a drawing like a sketch. And then he would reverse the piece, put it down on a piece of like illustration board, and then he would retrace over the lines, being able to see through the paper, like tracing paper, which would transfer the line to the paper underneath. It's a very faint line, but he would be able then to take the actual blood of the bull. Any blood is very, very strong. When we went to Spain, you'd go to Salamanca, and the students would actually put, I graduated, or however you would do it, in blood, and it's still there. Blood, when it's into a surface, it's just very, very permanent. So you don't need coagulants. You don't need to add anything to it. So John just used the blood. He would paint. The people would watch him. And these paintings now are very, very valuable. We don't have any more to sell, but that's how he did it. And I loved it because the initial drawings were much like I do, very gestural, very quick, and then the transfer over, and then he would work more and more, probably adding more of the blood to them. That's what I love. And we have a lot of those left. They would be called templates, but they're not in itself. Some people may not, they want a finished painting. But that's how he did it, and that's what I loved about the work, which is good because we have a lot of templates, and I guess they're ours. So they're very good.
And as far as you know, did John always use the blood of the bulls in his artwork?
No. This, and as I said, he needed money. It was a very good idea. He was very impressed in Spain when he would see some of the cave paintings, which again would have been done in blood. And he came up, I don't know anyone else that had done this, with using blood on paper. And as I said, the tourists would come, he'd be in, working in the plaza. They would pay for these paintings, and it would allow him to be able to do, get a suit of lights, rent a sword, rent whatever he needed. So he was very unique insofar as doing that. But that would be the drawings that he did. And then the other drawings, of course, you have, again, he is multi-talented as far as using different mediums. He uses watercolor, regular ink, pencil, oil painting, of course. So he has multi-mediums.
John was also a gifted writer. And Britt's John Fulton collection includes several books by and about him. In addition to his visual art, John could paint quite the picture with his words.
One thing I think is so neat is that he had come up with this statement about how he felt about bullfighting. And he really felt, I'm going to read it because I happen to have it here. To him, bullfighting was pure art. This is what he said, it is the most difficult art form in the world. You are required to create a work of art spontaneously with a semi-unknown medium, which can kill you in front of one of the most critical audiences that you'll ever see. And it all leaves just a memory. That was really, he felt, his art. But of course, to support himself, and because he was a trained artist, that's how he came to San Miguel. And he was good. Boy, I'm in my studio right now. I'm looking at the cartels he designed. And my most favorite one is this very large, it was a design poster for operas taking place in Seville. And I still have it. I have it in our bathroom. And I love to look at it. It's very large. It's probably around 2 feet or 3 feet, whatever. And the way he has this one man, probably the Barber of Seville, introducing the other characters. I mean, you keep looking at it and you keep finding things. He was a marvelous painter, draftsman, person.
It sounds like it. So he did posters and logos and other sort of one-off projects as well. Can you talk about that a bit?
Oh, yeah. He made a very fine living doing, I'm not sure exactly what you'd call it, but he had designing cartels. Okay, a cartel is a poster for a bullfight. There's a lot of information in it, but essentially, it's like any other illustrator. You would have to do a large painting first, okay? And the painting would allow space for where the bullfight was taking place, like if it was Malaga, so it would have a title. But the main part of the painting, and they're very involved. These are large paintings. I'm not good with math or sizes, but they're large paintings. So he would do a series of these. Then the different places that were going to put on bullfights would go to these places to look at the artwork, and then they would decide what they wanted to use. In other words, they'd put all their information, impose it on top of the artist's painting. So he did, I think, well, he never made a lot of money, but it was a business. There's a lot of information from a bullfight poster because it tells you where the bulls are from, it tells you who is fighting, and all of that is very important for people that are, knowledgeable. It can actually have them come to the bullfight.
Also in Britt's collection is the unique book on bullfighting that John originally wrote and illustrated in the early 1970s. And she seems to have taken its message to heart.
He was one of the few people that in English wrote a bullfighting book, and he illustrated it with his own drawings. So that one of the things that you have to get past when you're trying to explain about bullfighting is our American, more so, preconception about what is sport and what is art. This is not sport. This is an art. A man goes out there all by himself. He has 3 things he has to conquer. He has to conquer his fear of the bull. He has to conquer his fear of the people around him who are watching him. And then he has to conquer the bull. And it's an art. I can't explain it unless you've seen one. If you've seen a really good one, it's marvelous. And if you've seen one where the bull went out free, and it does happen, it's an indultado, where a bullfight is so good, and the bull is so good, and the people, you'll see them, there are hundreds, they're just chanting, toro, toro, toro. They really want the bull to go out free. And if the judge decides will award that, that is very good, and it happens. So it's, have you ever seen a bullfight?
I have not.
Okay, well, I wish you, when you come to San Miguel, and I'll take you to one, because it's like a 3-act play, and it's very exciting. If you put aside, this is an animal, if he does it really incredibly well, he may get out alive, and otherwise, it sure beats being, a stake somewhere, where you're lining up and the bulls are being, or the cattle are being killed that way. I'm not trying to justify it, because you can't, but if you do see it, go with an open mind. Think about what the man is thinking of, because they have to be almost animal behaviorists. They have to make decisions when the bull comes in, because a bull will fight like a boxer. They actually favor a right horn or a left horn. So the man who is fighting them has to be knowledgeable, and what to do and what to anticipate. It's an art.
And I want to tie this back to John's actual visual art. Have attitudes about bullfighting, at least among visitors to San Miguel de Allende, has that affected the market for John's paintings, as far as you can tell?
It's bullfighting. Okay, it's bullfighting paintings. It's difficult. I've done bullfighting drawings for years. The people that have a lot of money, that love this, that really want to do it, expect gifts. Okay. And the tourists that come, they are more flexible and they'll buy pieces, but maybe they are a little embarrassed when they get home to say, I really enjoyed this bullfight, because now their friends are looking at them differently. So it's always been difficult. John's work, he's getting more recognition, but he's been dead for a long time. It's very hard to pursue it, to show other people. But now we are getting a lot of interest in his artwork. And it's really excellent. But as far as sales, it's always been hard to sell bullfighting pieces.
And for the people who do like John's work, what do you think draws them to it?
Well, some of them are still around that have met John. I think if they've traveled and they've gone to different places, because you can go to France and different places, of course, Mexico, once they've seen a bullfight, he does it so well. I mean, John draws from such experience that it's beautiful. He also has done many famous people. Carlos Rusa was a Matador, and then he became a Rejoneador, and that's a man that fights on horse. And John did it beautifully. I'm looking at one right now. The horse is incredible. He did horses marvelously. Like sometimes he would just sell the horses, people aren't sure what's happening. He was such a good draftsman that he could convey anything. So he has many prints that he sold. He had a gallery in Spain. And he was so personable that people would want to go and seek him out. In the end of his life, to help earn some money, he would be almost like a tour guide, okay? People would want to meet John Fulton. Again, being unique, an American that became a bullfighter.
For Britt, mixed in with all the memories of John that are evoked through her collection of artwork, books, and more, are the stories of his generosity, from the help he offered to other matadors to his adoption of his son, Federico.
He would tell us, if you sold this painting, then please give all of the money to this man, this matador, who really needs it, and maybe he can't fight anymore. We sold, I would say around maybe 15 paintings very early on, and he had us distribute the money to different places. Then he also had a very large house in Seville, and his friend was Robert Vavra. Robert Vavra was a fantastic photographer, and they had this house together. It was almost a social center, a crash pad for aspiring matadors, and who he actually tutored without, pay. Federico comes in. Federico was in Triana. Triana is a very, very rough section. Many of the gypsies are there, of course, and apparently Federico was adopted, I think, when he was like 5 years old. And Federico was always, to be kind, the term is, it was difficult, perhaps. But anyway, he did help Federico, got him out of this very poor situation that he was with his family, so he helped him as well. And just before he died, he met a Japanese young matador who really, really wanted to be a bullfighter. So John helped him as well. That was a little tragic because he was in a bullfight, this young man, and John was helping him, trying to show him how to do different things. And he received a golpe, a very strong, I think the bull might have kicked him in the head. And no one really knew how serious it was. And a lot of the matadors are very tough, and they say, oh, no, I'm okay. And it turned out that this man was not okay. It ended up paralyzing him. And I know that John was always heartbroken. Maybe, he had the young man go into an area sooner than he should have. But the young man adored him, and he said, no, I took my chances, and it didn't work. And he was still alive, but under physical therapy and a lot of things. And John took an enormous amount of time trying to help him. And I think he never came back. I mean, the young man was always crippled. But at least he tried.
Wow, that's some story.
Yeah, it is something. There's many stories with John. I think because he was so unique. Again, the American in Spain. There were other Americans too, but he had this way of wanting to help.
Mm-hmm. So a bigger picture question here, and it's one that I guess we all face as living creatures who won't be around forever. Do you have a plan for the paintings of John's that you've held on to, either personally or through the gallery?
No, I had not thought of it. It's really not until actually you wanted this interview. The other friend who wrote a book, his name is Curo Camacho. And Curo doesn't have much money either. He's running a bullfight school in Sevilla. He came, and I forget what the year was, Curo came. He was publicizing his book. It's called Our Friend John Fulton Quixote. John really loved the idea of, Quixote. And there's one little excerpt that I read. It's called From the Man of La Mancha. I'm going to read it. Who knows where madness lies? Too much sanity may be madness. And the maddest of all, to see life as it is and not as it ought to be. And that was really kind of John. Like he could still see things like hopeful things, good things, not maybe as the way they were. So your question, I don't know. We have this now very, very large house. Not counting John's work, we probably have over 400 paintings of our own, primarily my husband's. To get back to Curo, I'm sure he doesn't have the money to take this work all back. So, no, I don't know. It's probably Henry's daughter is going to get all this stuff. I don't know what she's going to do with it. But I hope it does get a home. But we'll see. Maybe we'll sell some of it. The main idea is to have people recognize John, not as a bullfighter alone, but as a terrifically talented artist and person. So, I don't know. You can take it over. You want to try to sell some?
Maybe make a museum.
Well, that's one thing. My husband, you talk about collecting. My husband has been collecting as an artist artifacts for over 30 years. And we have one enormous room just filled with them. So we're actually going to open up our house to be able to show our work and John's and also all these artifacts. Maybe we'll build not only a museum, but a pyramid. Stick it all inside.
Get creative. And isn't there a bullfighting museum in Mexico City that has something of John's?
Yes, this is the other thing. Luis Ciafino was a really nice man, and he was the judge often in the Plaza Mexico. And they created a museum in Mexico City. And we had, at that time, Cura had brought, when he came for a trip to sell his book, he brought John's, I don't know what the slippers are called or the shoes are called that a Matador wears, but also the montera is the headgear. So he brought those two pieces along with all the artwork. And we took great delight because John really wanted to be able to fight in the plaza there. Well, he never could for many reasons, but at least his shoes are in the museum and his montera and a few pieces of art. So that's a start.
Build on that.
Mm-hmm. It's close, but no cigar.
Uh-huh. Well, Britt, that's everything I've got for you. I want to thank you for filling me in on your dear friend John Fulton and your collection of his really evocative art and your tales of his amazing life. This has been really fun.
Okay, great. And if you come, please come to Mexico, and we'll give you a tour complete with tequila.
Now I have to come.
Definitely. And you can have a place to stay, too.
I'm on my way.
Okay, well, thank you very much for keeping him alive, and his memories will go out. So thank you.
You bet. Okay, take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Britt's passion for collecting and appreciating the art of John Fulton isn't unique. Over the years, she's gotten to know many other collectors who are enthusiastic about John's art and the unique life experiences behind it. And it was through Britt that I got in touch with Scott Steadley, an American who first learned about John while serving in the U.S. Navy at the Rota military base in southern Spain in the early 90s. In all, Scott has acquired 2 bull's blood paintings and 5 lithographs, as well as 2 smaller bullfighting banners that he purchased from Britt. Scott's introduction to the work of John Fulton came from the man himself during a fateful visit made by the artist to the naval base.
I want to say he may have been there, once before when I was, there in the early, like the 1990 time frame. But when I got wind that he was coming to the base and I heard what he did, the bull's blood paintings and some of the other artwork, with the lithographs, stuff like that, I got very interested and decided to go.
And had you been to a bullfight?
I had, yeah. There were a couple of us at the activity that we were at, the center, that had been to several bullfights. I know one in Sevilla, I think one in Ronda. And I believe when they do the feria season, I think it's around the spring, they set up the temporary bullfight or the bullrings, and they'll have bullfights, kind of a more intimate. I mean, you're right on top of it. But we'd been to a couple of those before we actually went to the exhibit.
Uh-huh. And what did you like about bullfighting?
It was unique. I'd never seen one before, before you get to Spain. And I think one of the values of being in a foreign country like that is you kind of take in the culture, and kind of what they're into. And this was just a unique aspect of the culture. I was a bit kind of taken aback by some of the spectacle, because it's a bit disturbing in some ways, but still, it's part of the culture that they've, had for centuries. Just thought it was something that was interesting to do.
And so you bought a couple of items from him when he visited the base. At what point did you seek out Britt?
Well, ever since, I'd collected that artwork. I mean, it's really very unique work that he does. So I was constantly, and I still do, I get on eBay or, I get on some of these other sites to see if his artwork's available. And somehow, I came across Britt's contact information and reached out to her and just kind of asked, hey, do you have any of John's pieces, that might be for sale? And she was just in the process of kind of breaking out, the work that she and her husband had of, John's work. So she sent me a whole bunch of them. I ended up buying, I think, 2 cartels. They were, one was a bullfight and one was just a Spanish dancer. So these are smaller placards and stuff like that. So that's how I met Britt.
When people look at the art you have, do they ask about it? I mean, it must stand out or look fairly unique in your home.
Yeah, they do. One of the more unique ones was one we just picked up recently. We moved here about 3 years ago. And I was in a vintage store at one point, and I kind of was looking at this art section or whatever, and I immediately saw John's hallmark. It was a bull's blood painting and his signature. And it's funny because they had it listed, the title on it was Texas Longhorn, and they were selling it for $60. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's not really a longhorn, and it's worth much more than that. And so sure enough, I picked it up and brought it home and peeled off the back. And sure enough, there was a brochure from an early exhibit that John had done, I guess, I don't know if it was back in the 70s or 80s, but this was one of the original pieces that he had actually done and sold there.
Wow. Mislabeling has its place, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, they had no idea what the provenance of this was, and I was happy to just buy it for what they were selling it for, and just carry on. So
I'm glad you kept your cool and didn't blow your cover there.
Well, it's funny, when I spotted it, there was a woman that, I guess people do this, she had her camera and she's going along, scanning the pictures along the wall. This was one of them. And I kind of waited patiently, and then when she strolled off immediately, I got it off the wall and ran it down to the cashier to buy it because, boy, I didn't want to lose that one.
I can imagine. So one last question for you. I'm curious where you stand on this. Bullfighting, do you see it as sport or art?
Am I allowed to say both?
You can.
Yeah, no, I think it's both. Certainly, if you ask these bullfighters that, have been gored and whatnot, or tossed up in the air, or, I would say it's a very physical activity. So in that respect, it's a sport. But I also, it's got I would say art as well, because, based on the ones that I've been to, there's a very artistic flair to the way the bullfighters, carry on. And I also know the crowd, and it's an older generation, I think, that really there and in Spain kind of keeps us going. But they have very particular tastes on the style of the bullfighter and then kind of how they carry it on. And so I think in that respect, there is some artistic aspects to it, because I can guarantee if they don't like what they're seeing, they whistle, which means they don't like it. And you certainly know when they do like it, because they cheer and applause and stuff like that. But again, I wouldn't say it's something I would go see again. It just, again, for me at the time that I was there, it was part of the culture and just something that, I found interesting and thought, it was worth seeing.
So sport and art blended together in person and in the artwork you've collected.
I would say so, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate this.
Sure enough, David. Great talking to you.
Okay, take care.
You too.
So there you have it. 2 collectors of John Fulton's artwork helping to tell the artist's one-of-a-kind story. But why don't we wrap up this episode by hearing from the man himself? In 1958, John Fulton appeared on the game show To Tell the Truth, in which a panel of celebrities would question contestants in an attempt to determine which one is the actual person associated with a story. John appeared alongside 2 other contestants who were pretending to be American matadors, answering the celebrities' questions about bullfighting. And in answering a question about the Matador's union, he got a big laugh.
Number 3, what does the union do for you?
Well, among other things, they give me hospitalization.
For Keeps is a production of me, David Peterkowski. My thanks to Britt Zaist for talking in depth about her collection of artwork by the American Matador, John Fulton, and for sharing her recollections of her dear friend. At forkeepspodcast.com, you'll see photos of Britt, John Fulton, and some of the evocative pieces by John in Britt's collection. And in the show notes, I've included a link to Galeria Izamal, the now virtual gallery that Britt runs with her husband Henry. Also, thanks to Scott Steadley for sharing his stories of meeting the artist in Spain and collecting his work, even when it's woefully mislabeled and undervalued. Well done, Scott. The show's theme song is by Still Flyin, and the closing theme is by Eric Frisch. Additional music for this episode was provided by Roger Scanura. Thanks for listening to For Keeps. Until next time, keep on keeping on.